Good morning. We are delighted to have with us as our guest today, David Rabin, who is the Vice President of Global Commercial Marketing at Lenovo. And so welcome, David. You are joining my colleague and I. My colleague who always joins me in all of these is Raghu Iyengar, who is an esteemed professor in marketing at the Wharton School. He's also the director of Wharton Customer Analytics. So good morning. And again, thank you for joining us.
Great. And gentlemen, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And anytime I can talk to somebody who's got the word esteemed in their title, it makes me happy.
Well, there you go. So where I'd like to start with this is just to let our audience know, give us some background on yourself and how long you've been in this position.
Sure. So again, David Rabin, I work at Lenovo currently. I've been here about 15 years, and my current role is running our global commercial marketing. And so in layman's terms, think of that as us selling into business customers, ranging from big governments, educational institutions, Fortune 500 companies, you name it, which is really the sweet spot for our business. And I've had multiple roles leading up to this at the company, ranging from roles dealing with retailers, business partners, working in various geographies like North America and Latin America. Now I'm in a global role. And prior to joining this, I spent my first, I guess it was 13 or 14 years in the world of advertising agencies in the Washington, D.C. area, in New York, in Detroit. So I've seen both sides of the table, the client side currently and the agency side prior. So again, thrilled to be here.
Well, delighted to have you. I would like to get us into how the COVID pandemic has affected Lenovo. And in particular, trying to get some sense of, before we were meeting often, now everybody's on their computers. And so, my guess is there's been quite an impact. I'm curious about on the commercial side, how that has affected things. So let us know, how has the pandemic affected Lenovo?
Yeah, so when we talk about the pandemic affecting the company, we think of both filters. We think of us and we think of our customers. So from our vantage point, we are a truly global company. And again, as I mentioned, I work as part of a global organization. So I have both direct report employees and colleagues in dozens and dozens of markets around the world. So this notion of collaborating remotely is not foreign to us. The thought is, though, imagine if this had happened 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. We didn't have the same productivity and collaboration tools. So in a way, and I know this is going to sound a little bit bizarre, but we're fortunate that this happened now when we have the capability and technology to manage them. For our customers, it's been a little bit of a wild ride. I would say back in the March through June period, we had a phase with our customers we called the scramble phase. And that's what they were doing. Everybody overnight had to scramble. And of course, one of the beneficiaries, if you look at industry successes, has been the tech sector. So, despite some of the global economic challenges we saw last spring and summer, companies like Lenovo that were enabling workers like us, knowledge workers and educational institutions to get together, made out relatively well. So what I'd say today is that we've entered a good period of stability, right? We've been at this for a year. Right? So companies made smart investments over the last year. If you look at productivity, both measured on economic measures as well as employee reported productivity measures, people are doing okay. Again, in our knowledge worker sectors. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't tell you what the next couple of years will look like. And if you talk to major research organizations or analyst groups, there's a mixed bag, right? There's very pessimistic outlooks. There's very optimistic outlooks. We just don't know. But again, I think the word of the day would probably be stability. People and companies in our space are feeling a sense of calm. Now we got to figure out what's next.
Right. Great. No, again, thank you for joining us, David. I think it was interesting to hear, especially from the point of view of Lenovo, obviously being global already,
Mhm.
and the fact that you obviously were collaborating, working with global teams. Now, in the pandemic, to kind of talk about this idea of global, did you have the opportunity to learn how these teams were doing and hence be better prepared, perhaps in the US, because it was a little bit staggered out? So, how were you using what was happening in other parts of the world to perhaps help your clients and other people?
Yeah, I would say one of the beauties of being a global company is that we do have diversity across the board. So
Yeah.
diversity of employee, diversity of types of business we work with, diversity of thought. So for sure, we do have a sizable presence in China.
Yeah.
We certainly were able to see early on what was happening there. And absolutely, we've been able to share learnings across the globe. What's interesting, though, is that, and I'll give you a perfect world example in terms of this concept of return to work.
Uh-huh.
I get asked quite a bit by colleagues of mine, by customers, what's your return to work strategy? And the answer is where? Because in certain markets around the world, we're already hosting customer events in person. We're hosting intimate customer dinners. In other parts of the world, for example, here in the US, we're not doing that yet to any degree. And even if you talk to various Lenovo leadership around the world, some of our leaders are saying, look, I can't wait to get the team back in the office. Other leaders are saying, I don't care where my employees work from. So again, this diversity, while a beautiful thing, it also doesn't allow us to come up with any kind of one size fits all solutions.
Point.
Yeah. I will note there sort of is that learning that you have, but you've had to address things in a multiplicity of ways, and definitely hear that. Since you mentioned, back in China, you're in the United States. Lenovo happens to be a Chinese-based company, but you are operating from the United States. I'm curious, what's sort of been the impact of having a Chinese-based company with the pandemic having started there? Did that create any unique aspects to managing through this period?
Candidly, I don't think so. A lot of the industry that we work in fact, a lot of many industries manufacture
Correct. Yeah.
in China.
Yep.
So for sure, we have seen some of the global supply chain issues that many other companies and industries are seeing. Heck, my wife is waiting for a lamp from a retailer that's held up for a couple of months because of supply chain issues.
Yeah.
So nobody has been immune to that. But from a pure business standpoint, really not. And in fact, if you look at even a measure like our stock price has doubled since the start of the pandemic. So, the technology business right now in many areas, is quite healthy. And again, the beauty of being a company that operates in 180 markets around the world, and this has been the case pre-pandemic, is that we're able to withstand ebbs and flows of certain economies. So if you recall several years ago, the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, they were seeing aggressive growth where maybe some of the mature markets were not.
Yep.
Then you saw markets like Brazil slow down a little bit, but then we saw markets like North America, pick up quite a bit. So I'd say again, the beauty of our, kind of our globalization is that we are able to withstand a lot of economic challenges that other companies couldn't do.
No, great point. And I think again, going back to this idea of being international and kind of having lots of resilience because of that.
Yep.
Would love to come back to again the U.S. market. I mean, of course, we've seen lots of ebbs and flows, and then from your perspective, of course, clients and customers who are here. Another thing, as you mentioned, David, one of the big things that happened is people started, working from home.
Yep.
There's a huge, obviously, educational institutions. They had people coming in and working. Did that also impact your business? Was there suddenly a big demand for? I know in my daughter's school, for example, she's a 1 year old. Sorry, she goes to first grade,
Yeah,
and
yep.
they're all giving laptops. And so I want to hear like what was happening in educational institutions and what are you playing a role?
For sure. And Raghu, this is not just a US or a North America situation. This
Yeah.
truly is a global situation. The demand for devices for students is unlike anything we have ever seen. And in fact, there are institutions that are still waiting for devices or we've not been able to meet their needs. Again, this is an industry situation. So you could make a very strong case that nobody saw this coming, and nobody prepared for the day when virtual learning would be either a requirement or even a preference.
Right.
So, again, like we talked about our business seeing growth, absolutely education was very likely the top industry that required growth. And Raghu, to your point, I mean, there are school districts around the world who several years ago started talking about one-to-one computing, one compute device per one child. A few areas in the world or specific pockets got there, but the vast majority of the world was nowhere close. And we've had to scramble to try to get there. And you recall probably even in your own school districts how, last spring, everybody scrambled, but very few districts were thinking in March, wow, what if in September we're still remote?
Yeah.
And we started talking to customers late spring saying, we can forecast a supply issue. So if you have any hope of getting enough devices for the August-September timeframe, your window to order was yesterday. And, unfortunately, just because of the demand, we had trouble meeting the needs.
Wow. Obviously, not every industry is in that situation. So, as you say, technology is a benefactor here. We're both marketing professors. You've got marketing in your title. I want to hear a little bit about the marketing side of things and how it's been affected in your business. And I presume because you are in charge of the commercial side, that most of that selling used to happen face to face. I'm assuming that's had to change, and I'm wondering how that has worked and what it is that you guys have done to try and facilitate that, and in any way try and standardize it across your sales force.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it's good that you mentioned the sales force, because when we wake up in the morning in marketing, we think of us, the marketers, and we think of our sellers, and our job is to enable their success. So for sure, again, overnight things changed. And I have this phrase that I use with customers, but we also use it with our marketing team, which is none of us took pandemic response in college. So whether you're an IT manager in a corporation or you're a marketing manager, and so everybody in the world woke up sometime in the middle of last March and said, everything we're working on needs to be reevaluated. And so for our customers, of course, they have to figure out, how do I enable productivity, collaboration, security for millions and millions of employees around the world who are now working from home? Well, we had the same problem in marketing. So we had campaigns that were ready to roll out that had certain sets of messages that were no longer going to be relevant. We had certain marketing programs. Let's take events as an example. That's probably the best example. And when we talk about events, there's a multitude. There's giant trade shows with 150,000 people. There's more intimate events maybe with 5 or 10 customers. And then we also at Lenovo, we do a lot of events at our local locations where we bring in customers for the day and we can walk them through all of our solutions. And guess what? All of that stopped. So again, very quickly, we had to become virtual event experts. And so we have shifted 100% of our, or nearly 100% of our in-person events into virtual events. Of course, that presents challenges. If I can get you to fly to come see me at my office, or I can get you to come to an event we might have in, let's say in the US, in Orlando or Vegas, where all the big events happen, I kind of have you captive. But if I say to you now, I'm going to do that same event, it's going to be 8 hours over, in this case, where we're doing over Zoom, pretty easy to get distracted. And so we've had to find unique ways to encourage people to stay. And you're seeing all sorts of fun things out there. We held a Jonas Brothers concert, virtual concert for customers after an event. We've done more intimate events that involved cooking demos. One of our teams just last week participated in a virtual sushi making demo. I did a virtual wine tasting over the holidays with my team where we shipped them a little bit of wine ahead of time. I'm not sure I want my HR department to know that. Although actually, you know what? They were there. They were there. So that would be one critical example of how we as a marketing team had to shift. I mentioned a few minutes ago the messaging, because anytime you put a message in the marketplace, you want to be relevant. You can't be tone deaf. And so we very quickly had a campaign we had been working on. We had to scrap it, which of course doesn't feel good as an employee to have to throw away what you've been working on. We did some quick research in March and early April, and that's kind of where this notion of being a pandemic expert came from, where our customers said, please help me. And so we actually came up with a campaign we called Smarter Way Forward. Our corporate brand tagline is smarter technology for all. And so we adapted that and said, okay, we can help our customers find a smarter way forward. We're not pandemic experts per se, but we deal with a lot of customers. And so we're able to triangulate, hey, this is what we're hearing from this customer in financial services. This is what we're hearing from this customer in healthcare. How do we leverage all of those data points and come up with great solutions for our customers? In terms of actually producing materials and producing content, imagine trying to shoot a video in the days of COVID. Really difficult to do. And actually, a real-time example from just this week, which I can tell you about. We are global sponsors of the Inter Milan Football Club, soccer team, for those of you who are in the US. And we were going to be shooting a video with them this week, kind of a humorous case study of them using one of our products. And one of the players tested positive for COVID. Scrap the shoot. So that'll now be delayed for somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks. So those are the kind of things that we have to deal with today.
No, I think, clearly a lot of changes happening, but I'm glad to hear how you and the team are navigating through all of this turbulence. As Dave mentioned, I have the privilege of being the faculty director of Wharton Customer Analytics. So I care a lot about data and how people are using data. I would love to hear from your end, David, as we're getting more data, people going more digital, all those digital events happening, were you constantly testing and learning? And how were you going about seeing what campaigns might work, what may not work? Would love to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're probably familiar with the phrase, data is the new oil. Companies are kind of drilling for data to make great decisions. One of the fun things about companies like us that make technology is, a lot of our technology is meant to capture data. The whole notion of an IoT device that we all have, you probably have a dozen in your house that you don't even realize, is to capture data and then analyze it and do something with it. And of course, marketing is no different. The kind of school of thought that I use for this is we should be able to measure about 70% of what we do. And in marketing, you've seen a major shift, and I'm sure you talk about it at school. You've seen a major shift in how marketers really need to pivot from being thought of as an expense center to be thought of as revenue drivers, right? That's what we need to be doing. And the only way you can do that is to show attribution to your marketing. So, I'll give you a good example of even some of the virtual events that we've done. And this is work in progress. This is learning. I can measure all of the basics about an event today, right? I can measure how many people registered, how many people showed up, how long did they stay on, how many people viewed each of the individual videos that we did. Unfortunately, at times there's a giant leap in the commercial business to, did that lead to anything material? And in part because we have the human factor at play today. Ultimately, if a sales rep doesn't go into a Salesforce or a Dynamics and say, yes, I know that customer saw that thing, it may never get attributed back. Now, of course, we're working on that. We're finding ways to automate that so that a Microsoft Dynamics CRM tool will know. Raghu went to this event. Raghu saw the email that we sent after the event. Raghu clicked on the email. The rep was notified and now they called. So, I would say as an industry, we are not doing nearly as well as we should. The problem we run into as marketers is actually the same problem our IT customers run into. There's millions of solutions out there. Every day, if I'm an IT person at the University of Pennsylvania, there's 47 new vendors that are popping up overnight. Some of them may be great for me. I don't have the capacity to deal with them. We're in the same boat here in marketing. There are so many tools out there available for us that can make our jobs easier and justify our role as revenue producers that we simply can't get to them, all to test them out. But absolutely, there's the easiest testing, of course, we've been doing for years is digital media, right? I know exactly what's working. I know exactly that, piece of creative A is outperforming piece of creative B. Social, it's incredibly easy to track engagements. but it's that leap. In fact, I sometimes call it the moat. It's the marketing moat. So imagine a castle, you want to storm the castle, but there's the moat in the way. That's what we have sometimes. We just have this blocker that prevents us from actually getting the real data we want. Because think about it. If you're the SVP of a business, the global GM, you're the head of sales, you really don't care about engagement, impressions. You don't care about any of that stuff. It doesn't mean anything to you. Yeah. You want to know, how many leads did you pass to me? And were those leads so good that they actually converted? Yeah. And again, we've got this moat in the way. I would whiteboard it for you if we were in my office together, but you can picture it.
Yeah. Well, so the moat should never be a barrier for marketers, because we believe in promoting. Yeah. So we're in favor of those. That's not a problem. I do want to ask you, many companies have by necessity had to innovate different products during this time. It maybe isn't required, now for you, but I'm curious what innovation in product Lenovo has had to go through, if at all. And how much of that has been sort of inspired by the pandemic?
Yeah, so a very interesting question. And in the world of technology, for most of the things we make, we have longer lead times than a year. And in fact, one of the products that we launched during the pandemic was the world's first foldable laptop. So you can actually take the laptop, the screen folds in half, and it becomes a truly ultra portable device. And that's the kind of device that we saw a lot of good interest in during the pandemic, because everybody changed the way they work. Everybody became mobile. I've got great marketing stories about how we had to actually bring, again, literally the most innovative device that came out in 2020, how we had to bring it to market during the pandemic, which is another story we can get to. But what we're hearing from customers, and we have a lot of research to back it up, is that the 4 areas that we know matter most in our industry for customers working remote: productivity, collaboration, serviceability, and security. And so over the last 12 months, for sure, one of the biggest areas we've invested in is security, including some partnerships that we've developed. Because when you've got employees, in some cases, using personal devices on home networks, it's really problematic for a company. So, and security, which is a lot of it is built into the machine, a lot of it is software driven. We've spun very quickly to amp up customer security on endpoint devices. I'd say collaboration tools is another big area. Again, I talked about whiteboarding earlier, where you can't do that. And so we've partnered with internally, we've created devices. We have a brand we call Think Smart, which is our collaboration devices. We've got a home one called the Think Smart View, so I can actually still see you on my computer. I can work on my computer, and then I can use my Think Smart View to run a meeting. But we've also partnered quite well with companies like Google and like Microsoft. So, we saw big Teams adoption, and of course, we're using Zoom here, huge Zoom adoption. Now we got to think towards the future, because we know people are going to be doing this for a while. So one of the areas that we get asked about quite a bit is camera technology. We got to make sure we've got great cameras built into the machines. And so if you watch this space, definitely over the next year, likely much sooner, you'll see major improvements in the industry in built-in webcams. Because again, 12 months ago, how many web meetings did you run that used camera? Very few. Today, it's pervasive. So yeah, I would say that there's been a good bit of industry development in technology improvements, recognizing that we will see this either remote or hybrid work environment for quite some time, perhaps forever.
Yeah, no, I think great point. David, I want to just go a little bit more internal to Lenovo. One of the things we've seen over the years, and of course in the last year or so, is that, a lot of culture that is built within a company is having people come in, recruiting, when you can have people come in, sit next to each other, learn about the company, all of that. And much of it has become virtual now. So do you see, as you've done recruiting in the last year, how has it been? Are you getting in some sense people inspired by the Lenovo culture? How are you going about it?
Yeah, well, you're talking to somebody who, and you can see my background behind me, who pre-pandemic spent an awful lot of time traveling, meeting with employees, meeting with customers, analysts, press around the world. So, there's no easy answer for this, Raghu, because in part we had to make the best of the situation. I firmly believe that we are missing something, for sure. We are missing that connection. We have lost a little bit of the notion of collaboration, but we've made the best of it.
Yeah.
The thought you mentioned about new employees, we have many new employees who have started during the pandemic who have literally not met a single employee in person. But we use the tools at hand. We use video, and it's funny when I finally get to meet some of these colleagues, I believe that I'll feel like I know them. I'm sure we'll make the joke, it's so funny to finally or nice to get to meet you in person, but I already know these people.
Yep.
And we've been doing a lot of things to bring people together. In fact, my team just finished a 6-week walking challenge. So, we made it sort of a team bonding event. I mentioned earlier about the wine happy hours. We've done a number of virtual happy hours. So look, you find ways to adapt to the situation at hand. But, I do believe there's no substitute for that in-person connection. Now, do I think that in 12 or 24 months, we will be traveling and meeting in person to the degree that we did in 2019? I do not. I do not believe that will be the case. And you're hearing more and more companies talk about the hybrid work environment. So take an office site. I'm here in Raleigh, North Carolina, where we've got a huge presence, several thousand people. Previously, if I was in Raleigh, not on the road, I would be in the office. Well, in the future, we are envisioning a scenario where the office is more like a business center. Come in when you need to meet with your team. Come in when you need to have a workshop or a collaboration session, or just kind of get some work done. But it's not your primary office anymore. Your primary office is wherever you want to be.
So David, your answer leads right to the question that I was going to be asking you, and maybe you'll say you just answered it, which is, of all the changes that you have had to go through, what is it that you think will persist? And I heard you say the hybrid meeting, less travel. Are there other things that we often refer to as being sticky that you think will persist out into the future, both on the marketing side and just on the overall business side?
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, I wish I had a crystal ball so I could just give you the answer. Even on the event side, there is a very mixed bag of, will events return to what they were, or will we wind up in a virtual or hybrid world? And actually, we use CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, which is held every year in January in Vegas. It's a good example. So that event gets about 160 or 170,000 people a year. But if you think back about 12 or 13 years ago, when we had some significant economic challenges, I believe that event felt about 100,000 people, may have been back in 2009. And there were a lot of people that thought, well, CES will never come back. We don't need it. And within 2 years, 3 years, it was back and growing like mad. So, I would be foolish if I said that the world, let's say, of big events will never return. But I think this notion of hybrid, this meet in the middle, is going to be pervasive. And let's face it also, there are some factors inside organizations, like the CFO's office, that is currently looking at real estate costs. They're looking at travel costs and thinking to themselves, well, wait a second, our business actually improved last year. We saved, pick a number, $80 million on not traveling. We could probably cut $50 million of real estate. So I think there's going to be multiple factors at play. But yeah, so Dave, to just get to the point, yes, I believe there will be a hybrid work environment. People will not return to the office in droves like they did previously. I do believe that things like events are going to change permanently to more of a hybrid style of event. So I think we can expect to see that. I think this just whole notion of kind of employees having more say and more power than they did before is a big factor. Every piece of research that we've done and that we see in the industry says the employee is now starting to dictate what happens at the company. Everything from basic things like, this is the laptop I want to use, all the way to, I want to work from home 3 days a week. And you're seeing more and more CEOs are now coming out and saying the employee has the power. So, I think there's going to be a monumental shift in how business is done, but for sure, it's all going to be driven by the bottom line, right? Everything that we do ultimately is going to have to deliver results to the company. So for example, if we see in 2 years that this shift to this hybrid environment eventually eroded the company, it ruined employee productivity, it killed office bonding, guess what? We'll fix that very quickly. But I think at least in the next couple of years, we're going to see a big shift in how business is done.
Great. David, this has been an amazing half hour. And as we're coming to the end of it, thank you so much for all the insights. Would add one last question. And if, again, from yourself, looking at all the things that Lenovo has gone through, you've guided the team so wonderfully. If there is, one or two pieces of advice that you want to give to other decision makers who are going through these uncertain times, and as they chart their journey ahead, I would love to hear that.
Yeah. Probably one of the biggest pieces of advice that I have, and we talk about it internally, is it's okay to be wrong. And that's always the case. It is always the case in marketing to make bad decisions, right? As long as you learn from them, and as long as they're not illegal, immoral, or ultimately sink the company. We want to stay away from that stuff. But again, this notion of we're not experts in pandemics. Let's try stuff and see what works. And so we give a lot of freedom to our team. Try something, right? Let's give it a shot. We may not have done it before. It could be brand new to the company. It could make people feel a little bit uncomfortable, but let's give it a shot. And you hear terms like fail fast or fail forward. As long as you learn quickly and you can move on, that is probably from a marketing standpoint the biggest piece of advice. And then, from a senior marketing standpoint, you just have to have your people have the right mindset when they wake up in the morning. And I mentioned it earlier. Whether you're the most junior person in the organization or you're the CMO, what are you doing to actually drive the business forward? So I'm gonna give you just one quick anecdote. So I can't tell you how many times I've seen advertising agencies talk about the awards they win. And we won this award for creativity, and we used this famous actor, and it was so funny, and we won this award. And they forget the real important thing is, well, what did it do to the business? Did it help your client drive their business? So we've got to make sure that as marketers, we wake up in the morning, and for the folks at Wharton, right, that they show up thinking marketing is here to drive the business. We're not here to win awards. I mean, it's great if we do. We're not here to make funny stuff. I like it when we do. We are here to help the company succeed.
Yeah. Great advice. Really appreciate you sharing all of what it is that Lenovo has gone through. Appreciate you spending the time. Hope you get back on an airplane sometime soon. So
great.
Thank
David,
you
Raghu,
very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks, guys.